Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar today. My name is Raj Manoj, and I'm the president of Methodify. We are a research technology company that focuses on research automation, and I'll get more into that as we go throughout the presentation. So today we're going to be talking about how virtualization and research tech are changing the way QSRs gather and use consumer insights. So I have three parts to the presentation today, and we'll go through some of the current challenges that are impacting insights professionals in the QSR world as they try to adapt to this ever-changing landscape. We'll talk about the state of research technology and why it matters to QSR more than ever before. I'll provide some examples in terms of how some companies are adapting. And finally, we'll finish off with this idea of virtualization and how it can have a tremendous impact on the QSR industry in terms of connecting at a very different level with your customers. Now, before I begin, let's get into the current challenges, but let's set some context. There are three really big buckets that are trends and or challenges for the industry. The first is this idea of value and brand differentiation. So think of things like, are you trading on price? Are you a premium brand? How do you differentiate against everyone else who sells a chicken sandwich? And do customers even know the difference? The second moves to a bit more in the execution cycle, when we talk about things like the frequency in which offers are provided or new products are released. What actually matters to customers? New flavors, a robust line of products with small tweaks, or a new set of items? Is that every couple of weeks or every couple of months? Definitely lots to think about. And finally, maybe one of the biggest things to happen because of the times we're in is how has the QSR vertical been disrupted by things like the digital evolution and delivery services? How do you create brand loyalty and value in the cycle? How do you close the brand loop? In the past, you'd own that customer journey all the way through, but now you're dependent on another company to close that loop for you because they're delivering the products. And what's especially challenging is that they own all that data and insights in terms of how customers are searching and shopping for their meals. Definitely interesting times for the QSR industry. And all of this really comes full circle when we think about many of these challenges and how we're making decisions to embrace these trends or combat these challenges. This fundamental idea of gut-driven versus data-driven. In a time when it's never been easier to lose a customer, never been harder to get one, how can we make sure we're doing everything in our power to make the right choice? When the world has never been faster, how do we act at the speed of our customers? Knowing the choices have such severe consequences, how can we become more data-driven and have that mindset so we're making choices that are rooted in empirical information? So let's get right into it. Part one, consumer insight challenges. So this is a great quote from the great David Ogilvy. And it's consumers don't think how they feel, they don't say what they think, and they don't do what they say. So super confusing a lot of times to figure out what they really want. And this really sums up how hard it is many times to get in the head of a consumer. Particularly in this year, you have extra challenges. And as I mentioned earlier, the speed in which consumers are acting. They are dictating terms, and many times we are playing catch up. A large part of that also is the fact that we are still using traditional research tools that were created in a very different time period. For example, how do you right-size the idea of traditional research taking a couple of months when we need data this week or this day? That becomes a massive challenge to insight professionals working in QSR. And this chart really illuminates this idea regarding this challenge. We're in a world of infinite data. We get data from everything. Even the idea of traditional market research is losing some steam. You're seeing more and more people searching for big data to understand how to connect data they might already have on a consumer versus looking up how to run a concept test. The problem is everyone is looking for a silver bullet via big data because they are hoping it will speed up the process, but that is not necessarily true. It's about the right type of data for the specific problem you're trying to solve, particularly when you want to understand the why. Now, part of the reason for some of this angst in the research process is about the way in which we've evolved marketing and product launch. So take a look at this chart. In the older ways, in terms of what we used to do, it was a very linear model. You'd come up with this massive strategy and confirm it via market research. You tinker with the product and launch, you might run a couple of extra market research pieces in the middle, but most often research moves on to the next thing. The challenge, as we know, is that the typical product launch in the past might have taken a year or more. So your research might be completely out of date since it was run so long before the launch. You may have lost ground to competitors who have launched something similar, or maybe the industry has pivoted in a different direction. Now compare this to sort of what we're seeing in this new version, this new more agile approach. In this specific process, you can see there are more places for research to play as you are pushing out the product in an iterative process. So if you sold burgers, maybe it's a new type of sauce every month. If it was pizza, maybe it's the selection of new toppings every month. But during and after each of those releases, you're running research to understand the customer. It gives you the ability to keep learning and iterate in real time, layering up to a strategic goal. It allows you to have that voice of the customer in the boardroom at all times versus just the beginning of the strategy. The most important aspect of this approach, it allows you to pivot or make adjustments if something isn't working. Conversely, it allows you to add incremental components if something is working. If you look at the linear model versus the agile model, you can see that the customer is much more embedded in the process and it becomes much more data-driven in the decision making. And finally, one of the biggest challenges is how companies are structured. You have insights professionals who have had so many stakeholders internally asking for things, such as your product folks or the CMOs. And on top of that, you have all these vendors wanting to work with them. At most QSR companies, the insights groups are fairly small, but they're being asked to solve a plethora of problems. So through no fault of their own, they become the bottleneck that can hold up the research process. While many may think the research can be slow, what I'm really trying to show here in this slide is that some of this is systemic, and that's what caused a lot of this angst. A lot of this can be alleviated through research tech, which leads us to this really big question. How do we democratize the flow of data and insights at the speed of today's consumer? And obviously this matters a great deal to companies because the better you understand your consumers, the better your company will do. And this is a great segue into our next section, since research tech can really accomplish a lot of these tasks. So let's get into part 2. What is the state of research tech today? So let's start with a quote from one of our great clients at Wendy's, Jackie Weber. For those who don't know what research tech is, she summarized it really well. Research tech means, to me, starting to bring in innovative technology into our market's research space to help us do things in a better way, so we're ultimately able to service our internal clients in a more efficient and better way. If you work, or if you've worked on the marketing side, I'm sure you're familiar with some of the thousands of companies in the MarTech space, companies like Adobe or HubSpot or MailChimp. There are so many tech companies that help marketers on that side of the business. Well, we are now starting to see this growth of technologies on the research side of the business as well. This is just a small selection of the companies in the space. There are hundreds that I haven't listed here, and every day there are new ones that pop up. But the key learning is that the companies that are popping up every day have a very specific problem they're trying to solve. Whether it's automation or AI or better use of video, they're playing in a specific box and want to solve a specific problem. This is a very different place than the industry was 20 years ago, where you would walk and talk to a market research firm who would have multiple solutions to solve all your problems. Now most QSR companies have a plethora of companies they're using to solve very specific problems. And why is this important? Because more and more asks from the marketers and executives can be bucketed into specific research technology functions. So, for example, can we understand the customer journey in a better way? Typically a mobile ask. Can we get some sort of qualitative feedback about how consumers feel about a specific product? Typically via video. And last but definitely not least, how can we get customer feedback in hours or days, not weeks or months, via some sort of research process automation? So instead of hiring a typical research firm that would make you pay for consulting fees, you're seeing a lot more QSR insight professionals signing on for specific research technology tools, and they solve these issues internally in a much more cost-effective and efficient way. For today's webinar, I'm going to focus a little bit deeper on automation, on the automation category. That's becoming such a huge part of the insight professional's toolkit, particularly in QSR. And this is really where our company plays as well. And as I mentioned at the onset, we are a research technology company that focuses on research automation. So our goals are always, how can we help create more speed in the research process? How can we create more efficiency in the research process while not giving up any of the research rigor? And most importantly, knowing that your company may have a unique need, how can we customize automation to fit your needs versus you having to buy something that might not work for you? And just to give you an example of how it would work, typically a person would log into our platform, they would select the research methodology that they would use to solve their current research problem, they configure the method to suit their specific needs, and this could be specific to things like region or uploading specific concepts or ideas or different things like that. And as soon as they're ready to launch, they would select launch. And as soon as they're actually starting, they start to see completions and responses roll into their questions. Once completed, they would get their full report on the research in 48 hours or less. And so why I mention that is we're seeing a lot of the QSR industry using this type of tool set, whether it's ours or competitors, to solve very specific needs. And they're using automation because it actually helps for that cost effectiveness or process efficiency. And so you're seeing some examples on the slide, such as naming or creative evaluations, or et cetera. Now, what's key as a takeaway is that these would typically take weeks or months, but these companies are getting the data back in hours or days. So ostensibly, you could test on a Monday, get the data back on a Tuesday, make the adjustments on Wednesday and Thursday, and go into market with creative on Friday. That is a stark change from the traditional timelines and allows you to keep pace with the customers in the marketplace. What's also important to realize is the idea of research automation can be applied to any point in the process. So in this example, you can use a methodology as early as the ideation or as late as in market. What's even more is that your ability to customize any of these pieces to solve your unique problems is there. So maybe it's a geography, or maybe it's type of audience. Maybe you just want to have past 4-week QSR consumers. While automation is important, it really has to be configured to solve your unique needs. Now, pulling on that thread, I'll share a quick case study on how one of our QSR clients used automation to adapt during COVID. As the data is still being used for some new product launches, I can't share the brand just yet, but we had a large QSR company who really had to figure out how to adapt during these times. So they basically came to us and customized our tracking tool. And essentially, it allowed them to track changes in attitudes, behaviors, sentiment, and spend during COVID. Now, that's all pretty basic stuff for the platform, but the really powerful part is what the tracker allowed them to do. It saved them a ton of time because of how quickly we could get it set up and get the data back for every month. Typically, this would take weeks, and we did it in 5 days. It was also super cost effective. They could run 6 of these types of pieces of work for typically the same price they would pay a traditional firm for just one. And most important, it allowed them to be agile to make decisions on what to offer, how to safely open the eyes of their consumers, and how to effectively communicate around anything COVID related. Now they were looking at ways to add to this via new types of technologies to get even deeper with their consumers, which is a really nice segue into part 3 of the presentation, the virtualization of tomorrow. And if you remember earlier in the presentation, I showed you a slide on sort of the research tech industry and sort of the 600 companies that are in there right now. But we're going to see some massive changes over the coming years. And this really plays into this idea of virtualization. Things like 5G, AI, and mixed reality are all creating new ways where virtualization will become a bigger part of the research toolkit and are going to have a significant impact on the QSR industry. Specifically, we believe there will be 3 parts that can really be interesting for the future of QSR. We think those are going to be interviewers, people, and analysis. And so for interviewers, think a virtual version of researchers who can dig deeper and get qualitative feedback from consumers. When it comes to virtual people, think of virtual versions of yourselves online, and I'll go through that in a little bit as well. When you think of virtual analysis, think of synthesizing all that data you already have via machine learning or some sort of AI, so you aren't spending months going through data, but just minutes. And all this becomes important because it can solve some major issues that a lot of companies are having. So for example, take this idea. Imagine if you could repurpose past data to answer future business questions. So this is, I'm going to start with this quote, but this is one of our clients from Mars, Michelle Gansley, and she puts it pretty eloquently. So we spend millions of dollars every year on ad hoc studies to answer a question. We often only use that study once to answer that specific business question and throw the rest away. This is why we started a new work stream called Zero Waste Research. Now, companies like Mars are moving forward with initiatives like this in a multitude of ways. Now let's take a look at the example of how they are starting to look at this data democratization to get to this idea of utility in research. And so they asked us to take on this task. How can we create more utility of data so everyone around the world had access to it to have an easier way to search for actual data? So we took all their global data, put it into one platform, and made it searchable via voice to make it that much easier for employees to find data. What was really important here is that we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. The power of a platform like ours or others in the industry is that it's a great way to connect different technologies. In this case, we use voice tech, natural language processing, and their knowledge management provider, KnowledgeHound, to make all this happen. It's important to remember that connecting all research tech is vitally important to seeing the greatest benefits for your company. Let's get into the next example. Imagine you could interview thousands of consumers at the same time. So we talked about the idea of virtual interviewers earlier, and there are several research tech firms that offer this type of chatbot technology, companies like Chris or Quester, that allow you to get qualitative feedback but on scale. So instead of having focus groups at a central location, which has become increasingly difficult during COVID, you now have this option to have this technology into your tool set. It can get thousands of in-depth responses in hours. It's a really powerful way to get data for things like if you want to do taste testing or just get opinions about your brand, especially because we're all so used to texting, and that's the same approach it uses. You get a lot of depth when it comes to your answers. So let's go on to the next example. Imagine if your consumers could provide real-time feedback during your brainstorming session. And this idea of virtual people isn't something new. It's the idea of digital twins has been around for a while. And essentially, it's digital versions of things in our physical world. In the old days, it was more around things, but it's more recently been virtual versions of people. And this Gardner graph of sort of innovation shows you sort of where that sits. So what's really interesting is this company called Persona Panels. And Persona Panels has created an animated personas, which essentially are virtual versions of you or I. They've created digital avatars of segments of the population. And these avatars consume media the way you or I would on a daily basis. So for example, I like sports, I like fitness, I like politics. So the segment for me would go consume the types of media I would online, but it's a virtual version. And the beauty of these segments is they're constantly evolving. If you had a segmentation system of your own, it can be fed into the system, and the beauty is it's dynamic. So typical segmentation stands still for a couple of years because they're expensive to run, and so you don't want to update them all the time. But these segments basically learn every single day. So why are companies getting super interested? Well, imagine insights professionals in QSR companies and their marketers sitting in the same room and typing copy into the system. Well, it automatically scores it and tells you how the segments would react at any given time. And as you change words, for example, let's say you're testing claims or messages, the scoring changes. So might have taken you weeks is now done in seconds. This is extremely effective for pre-testing or brainstorming. So imagine whittling down your 30 or 40 ideas down to 3 or 4 and then doing hardcore research on those. And again, the driver here is speed. People want data faster than ever. And this gets us to our last example of virtualization. Imagine if you could see customer reactions whenever you wanted. Well, meet Rachel. She's built by a company called EmoShape, which came out of the movie industry. And Rachel is a virtual version of a person with over 64 million synthetic muscles in her face that react to whatever she reads or hears. This is so advanced, in fact, that you could hook up physical monitors so she can react to things like heat. Now, while this is still far in the innovation curve, it's definitely coming. And what is so powerful is that you can have a visualization of your consumer at any time you want. Now, where there is real application in this is sort of our vision of what the version of the boardroom will look like in the future. So imagine having all your customer segments available at any given time, and you can interact with them to get their feedback in real time about anything. There will be no excuse to not test and to not get feedback, and because you can kind of test and do research so quickly. So virtualization does have a real serious impact on the future of the QSR industry. So with that, I'm going to leave you with 3 takeaways. First, the idea of scalability is here. Research tech allows for democratization of data and provides research and insights groups to do more with less. Second, it's absolutely much easier starting to get way more feedback from consumers at any point in the marketing and research process with all the tech that's out there. And third, while this tech exists, people are still key. Great data provided by your consumers is really how things like virtualization can really move the industry forward. So thank you for your time today, and hope you enjoyed it.